Graphics card sellers are finally waking up, and they're being woken up by a soggy slap in the face called reality. Because yes, GPU prices are ultimately coming down to levels we never thought we would see during the GPU crisis. But you guys should already know this by now, as it's something that we covered a lot here on the channel. So if prices are hitting rock bottom and you're thinking of buying a cheap used GPU, it ultimately leads to the question, how do you buy a used graphics card safely, effectively, and with as little risk as possible to make sure that you don't get scammed or don't get a defective card without the possibility of returning it? And that's what we're going to cover today. Ultimately, I want this video to explain what you should be doing when researching used GPUs, and will give you the tools that you need to be best set up to buy one and be protected during the process. So are those crazy low price cards that you've been eyeing online going to give you the frame boost that you need, or are they going to bring a very pretty paperweight and a pocket full of sadness? And stay tuned to the end, because I'm also going to cover what specific GPUs I'd be willing to spend a bit more on to make sure that you're better protected from future issues once you've owned the card. Let me explain. So I have a question. Are you an avid PC enthusiast stuck with that ugly ass Windows watermark ruining your gaming and streaming experience? Well, I have great news for you. Whokeys is a software licensing website dedicated to getting you affordable keys. And the best part is you can get rid of that watermark in a matter of minutes. All you need to do is head down to the video description, click the sponsor link, and enjoy an additional 25% off using my coupon code TL20. With PayPal checkout and quick key delivery, all you need to do is hit the Windows key, type activate, and paste your key right here to become fully activated. It really is that simple and that cheap. So head down to the video description if that sounds right for you. And thank you Whokeys for sponsoring this video. So we are going to cover which cards I would focus on and which ones I would typically avoid a bit later on. But the place that I want to start with is with the marketplaces, the buying platforms. Which one is going to offer the best buyer protection, what to do at time of purchase, and then most importantly, what you should be doing when the item is delivered. So there's ultimately going to be two different ways that you'll buy a GPU, either in person or online. So let's start with in person. We're talking about Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, and OfferUp here in the US, but you'll know which marketplaces this translates to where you live. And although some of them do offer shipping options with buyer protection, I'm going to save that method for a bit later on and focus on the meeting up aspect. Honestly, meeting up in person is the most risky for a few different reasons, but it can have the greatest reward if you are set up for doing it. As sellers don't have to pay about 15% in eBay and PayPal fees, I found that you can negotiate a much lower price by referencing similar products on eBay, then explaining that you will go with those options unless they can give you a better price. You can then reference the fact that you'll have buyer protection on eBay, and they will still make more money even if they drop the price by up to 15% lower than what you found on eBay. Plus it's cash. Cash is king. But that's typically a good strategy for negotiation on any platform. Tell them what they're competing against and how they're competing with it. But meeting up with any stranger to hand over cash does come with risk. And the two biggest in this situation are, what if they sell you a defective card, and what if they do something even worse, like force you to part with your cash in an extremely traumatic way? So let's talk about that, because the solutions for both are actually counterproductive to one another. Let me explain. If you're worried about them selling you a dead GPU, you'll need to be in an environment where you can test it and put it into a system to make sure that you're happy. And we'll cover how to test any GPU a bit later on. However, to best protect yourself from the seller being a psycho, the seller's rating on the platform is going to be a good indication. But you'll still want to meet in a very public, high traffic place, preferably during the day. Though that's not always enough. If you guys want me to explain the time that somebody tried to jack me, let me know below. But that was in a CVS parking lot in the middle of the day. So since then, I've always forced the person to meet me by a police station, because if they aren't going to meet you by a police station, that is a red flag. Move on. Also, never hand over money without at least seeing and inspecting the card first, but you should be prepared to at least show that you have the cash. So the question becomes, how do you meet in a very public place while also being in an environment to test in? You'll need to do this before you part with your money, as you won't be able to return it later on. This means that you'll need to plug into power and stick that GPU into a system, which if you have a small generator, that would be perfect, but seems unlikely. So you need to make sure that the establishment is going to be okay with you setting up a system and testing for a while, which at this point is making meeting up in person to buy a GPU very difficult to recommend, unless you know what you're doing and have a plan for how you can set up and test it. Which brings us onto the much safer option, and the one that I would recommend for most people. Hands down, online marketplaces are going to be your best option for reducing the risk of being scammed because of their buyer protection. You can Google for each marketplace in your region, but here in the US, some of the most popular ones are eBay, Amazon Renewed and Warehouse Listings, Mercari, OfferUp Shipping Service, and Swapper. quite a daunting list. But don't worry, we're going to eliminate 3 of them straight away. Out of all of their return policies, only Amazon and eBay offer a defective item return window that I feel is long enough for you to appropriately test a GPU to see if it's working the way that it should. And not being very familiar with Swapper, I'm uneasy about the no definitive numbers and the ambiguity around their returns policy. So because of that, especially if you're new to buying used, I would highly encourage you to stick with either eBay or Amazon. Links to those will be in the video description. Amazon seems to typically have higher prices but a better guarantee, whereas eBay is the opposite. Lower prices but more stringent return windows. So before we cover the best ways to avoid common scams, let's quickly make sure that you're looking at the right places for these platforms to understand the buyer protections that are in place to try and protect you. Because Amazon sells directly to consumers through their Amazon warehouse program, the item is both shipped and sold by Amazon. This mitigates a lot of the skepticism of nefarious sellers trying to scam you, as Amazon's customer support is typically excellent, and you can check out the details of the item right here. And if you choose to buy an Amazon warehouse item, you have a 30-day return window for any issues. The other side of Amazon, however, is that it's also a third-party marketplace, selling used products to consumers that are never inspected or even seen by Amazon themselves. And this can be either a good thing or not so good, as it's done 2 different ways, essentially verified sellers and non-verified sellers. For non-verified sellers, similar to how Amazon warehouse items are displayed, you'll have a list of used cards right here on the product page, but stated sold and or shipped by someone else. Used items like this are basically the same as buying something on eBay, and each seller will have their own policies and seller ratings that you should assess. But at the exact opposite end of the spectrum are the verified ones, which offer the best protection. And these can be found over at Amazon's renewed deals, like this GPU. Amazon renewed items like this have the renewed text in the title and the renewed guarantee in the product listing. And this is the thing that is going to best protect you. Because they are verified by a trusted Amazon partner, the return window is 90 days, 3 times that of both Amazon Warehouse and eBay. So if you're particularly worried about future issues, focusing on items with the renewed guarantee would be my suggestion, though they tend to be the most expensive. The cheapest end up being on eBay. eBay is a bit of a wild west compared to Amazon Warehouse and Amazon Renewed. However, once delivered or your expected delivery date comes, you get 30 days of buyer protection to file a claim for a variety of different reasons, including an item that never arrives, if the wrong item was sent, and if the item wasn't as described, which also covers a graphics card that was meant to be in working condition, but isn't. eBay's buyer protection is actually quite robust and tends to favor the buyer in most circumstances where there is a dispute. But that doesn't mean that even with buyer protection, you won't get scammed. So you need to make sure that you're following some simple but effective strategies to minimize your risk. So before we discuss which models you should prioritize over others, I want to make sure that you're best set up to avoid scams and that the buyer protection is going to work in your favor. For Amazon Warehouse and Amazon Renewed, this isn't going to be as much of a big issue compared to eBay and other marketplaces, but these tips will absolutely translate to any online platform that you decide to go with. So we will cover how best to protect yourself after you buy in a bit, but first, let's take a look at what clues a listing might have that would indicate you may be scammed before you even hit buy. Well, let's take a look at these idiots. This is asshole number 1. The thing that should immediately jump out to you is that in the listing title, we can see that they have added the text paper edition. Now, this is a pretty common scam to most eBay users, but if you're unfamiliar with the platform or the product, this may catch you out. Avoid anything that says paper edition, photo edition, or anything that could imply that it's not the actual graphics card. You want to be thoroughly checking the title, the description, and the item's details right here. Congratulations to Slashy97. You are first on the shit list. Second is Omega Automotive. Now, this isn't as bad as the first one, but reinforces the fact that you should really be reading the listing carefully. When a seller puts something like non-XT in the listing, most likely what they're trying to do is have this RX 6600 show up in a user's search for the RX 6600 XT. And if you're in a rush, it is easy to miss this. And unfortunately, buyer protection will not have you covered for not reading a listing properly. But another thing that is also easily overlooked is the product images. If the product is listed as used, it is a red flag if the photos in the listing are obviously the marketing images from the manufacturer. You have to ask yourself, why would they not want to show you the card that you are purchasing? And a great tip to protect yourself even further, drop the images from the listing into Google. If that image is all over the internet, it is a good indication that the seller has just Googled the product, grabbed a couple images, and then made the listing. There is no proof that they actually have the product ready to ship. The absolute next thing that you need to do is have a good look at the seller. You want to make sure that they have some feedback to their name. It doesn't need to be in the hundreds or thousands, but 0 to 10 I probably wouldn't even consider. However, the thing that you have to remember is that even if a seller has thousands of feedback, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have ever sold an item on eBay, and doesn't mean that you should trust them. This is one of the easiest things to manipulate on the platform, and for any listing, you should be going into the seller's feedback, then selecting seller feedback. This is where you can have a look at other items they've sold and the experience of the buyer. We can see here that the seller has sold a few graphics cards with positive feedback. This is a great sign. But hang on, if they've sold other graphics cards, isn't that a bad thing? They're probably a miner and the cards are basically as good as dead, right? Well, not quite. For those of you that have been with me for a while now, you'll know that I'm not an advocate for mining. This has come up a lot, but it would be irresponsible of me to say that you should avoid mined on graphics cards altogether. And this is true for 2 reasons. One of them may help you find a great card to buy. Number 1, even if the seller states the card has never been mined on, I would not believe them. My suspicion is that most GPUs that could mine did during the GPU crisis, which we have covered a lot. And even well-established sellers misrepresent their products all the time. The word of someone that is looking to receive money from you is only good if you trust that person. And number 2, mining on a graphics card is not the doom and gloom you might think it is. In many ways, it can actually be less detrimental to a graphics card, but only if it has been well looked after. If a card has been running with an undervolt, the fans have been kept at a consistent speed, and the memory temperatures were in spec, that's actually a card that's 100% worth considering, as the previous owner knew what they were doing to keep their investment as healthy as possible for as long as possible. So before you buy, you may want to send a message to the seller and ask them about the history of the card. Ask them if it has been mined on, what their numbers were for their undervolt, core underclock, fan speed, memory speed, and hash rate. If they do respond with figures, that is already a good sign, even if you don't know what those numbers mean. But you can always check if they are good results with one of the many mining communities. And if the seller says they just upgraded to a new GPU, ask them to take a picture of it with their eBay username on a post-it note in the frame. Make them prove it. But that doesn't answer the question of which cards to buy. Well, there are some really strong tips for selecting the right cards and also which ones to avoid. Let me show you. The 3 things that I care most about when buying a used GPU is the availability of replacement fans, transferable warranty, and stock memory temperature while mining. And in my opinion, the worst case scenario is that somebody has mined on the card and hasn't optimized for it, and the stock cooling for the memory has the temperatures beyond their limit to the point of non-stop thermal throttling. So that actually gives us a really nice simple set of requirements for which graphics cards to focus on. You should narrow down your search to cards with good stock mining temperatures, easy to source replacement fans, and preferably a transferable warranty. EVGA will give you that transferable warranty provided that they still have RMA stock after, the divorce. But something like the MSI RTX 3080 Gaming Z Trio has exceptional memory temperatures and replacement fans, which makes it an excellent candidate if you're looking for something in that performance level. And I'll compile a list of recommendations below for other RTX 3000 and RX 6000 models I would recommend. So great. You're ready to hit buy with confidence, but don't get so excited just yet. There are several important but simple things that you should be doing to ensure buyer protections will actually work in your favor. Let me explain. So, how do you best protect yourself from some of the more common post-purchase scams on these platforms? Well, don't just take my word on it. Let's figure this out together by understanding both common ways someone might scam you, as well as how you might be able to combat this through the inbuilt protections, as well as some very simple and effective strategies that you can implement to assist them for an extra level of protection. So let me introduce you to James, the jolly eBay shopper. James bought a graphics card through eBay, and he did all of the pre-purchase tips that we mentioned, and can't wait to test his new card. He's been tracking that delivery daily, as the seller did update the listing with the tracking information. The delivery date comes and no GPU. What gives? James checks the tracking and, to his surprise, it says the item has been delivered. He checks all around his house, his mailbox, and nothing. What should James do? Well, I've had this happen a couple times before, and it could be for a few different reasons. The first thing that I would do is contact the courier's customer service. With the tracking number provided by the seller, you can find out if it's an issue on their end. As the seller is responsible for getting you the package, even if it's an issue with the courier, you are still protected. But if it isn't the courier's fault, this may indicate a scam where the seller intentionally delivers a different item to a different address. So you need to confirm 2 things with the courier. The the delivery address, and the weight of the package. The weight is important, as all parcels will be weighed when the courier receives them, and if the weight is any amount less than the weight of the graphics card, it is not possible for a graphics card to be in a package that weighs less than the card itself. And for delivery address confirmation, the courier's customer service likely won't tell you the package's final delivery address for security reasons, but they should be able to confirm if it's the same as the postage address that you gave the seller. And if it isn't and you use eBay, contact them immediately by filing a claim right here. And do this within 30 days after the expected delivery date. However, if the address is the same and the weight looks good, I hope you have a video doorbell or security cams near where you live. Luckily for James, when he contacted FedEx, they said that was an issue on their end, and the package will arrive the next day. Typical FedEx. Tomorrow comes and James is eagerly awaiting to see if FedEx delivers it in one piece or several individual pieces. But then it finally happens. The delivery person comes and the package looks surprisingly good for FedEx delivery. I wonder if you can tell if I've been burned by them a lot. So James's uncontrollable excitement is now palpable, and he tears that thing open like a 5-year-old on Christmas Day, only to find out that the package contains not the graphics card that he ordered, but a box of Yorkshire tea. James is happy. James is British, but after finishing the world's most expensive cup of tea, James feels instantly sad, as he now has to contact the seller about this mistake. And what's making it even worse is the seller is adamant that they sent the graphics card, and James is having a hard time resolving this issue. What could James have done differently? Let's rewind. Right here. This was his biggest mistake. Instead of tearing that box open like an uncontrollable infant, James should have done one of the most important things that anyone should be doing when buying an expensive item through an online marketplace. Before you open the box, you should set up your phone to record the entire process in one take. You want to show the box, its condition, and open the package on video, without the box or its contents ever leaving the frame. This can cover you for so many reasons, not just scams. And in this scenario, eBay was easily able to see that James didn't tamper with the box, the tracking number is the same as the order of the graphics card, and it was in fact the tea that was delivered. This helped his claim he got his money back and was ready to try again. But James just can't catch a break and needs to return the card because in his testing, it shows that it's producing memory errors. Armed with the knowledge that video evidence can be extremely useful, he videos the entire process of packing it back up and goes one step further. He markers over the tape that covers the seams so that no one can open the package without destroying the placement of these markers. Good job, James. And he got a GPU that he was extremely happy with, at a price performance unmatched by anything new. Following the steps that James did will minimize your risk when buying anything on these platforms. And to further protect yourself, start by checking out my list of best used GPUs below for each model. But that doesn't answer the question of testing, which is the very first thing that you need to do once you get your card. But the question is, how do you tell if a graphics card is performing the way that it should? How do you tell if it's defective? Luckily, we have the answer to that question in this video, where we cover the testing process you should be doing immediately after receiving the card. So check that out by clicking here, and remember guys, share, like, subscribe, they are always appreciated, and I hope you have an amazing day.